In the entire recorded span of human history, one name stands apart from every other conqueror, every other king, every other general. He took the throne at 20. He was dead at 32. In between, he built an empire stretching from Greece to the edge of India, crossed 3 continents, and fought dozens of battles across 13 years of continuous war. He never lost, not once. His enemies called him cursed. His soldiers called him a god. History calls him the Great. This is his story. To understand Alexander, you need to understand what came before him. For 2 centuries, Greece had been the most advanced civilization in the Western world. Democracy, philosophy, mathematics, all of it came from this small rocky peninsula. But Greece's greatest weakness was built into its identity. The city-states refused to unite. Athens and Sparta spent decades destroying each other. By the end of it, Greece was fractured and exhausted. To the north sat Macedonia. Greeks considered it a backwater. Mountainous, rough, barely civilized by their standards. That changed with one man, Philip II. Philip rebuilt Macedonia into the most effective military machine the ancient world had ever seen. His key weapon, the sarissa, a pike nearly 18 feet long. When soldiers formed up in tight rows, each man's sarissa extending past the man in front, the result was a moving wall of iron that nothing could stop head-on. He paired this with heavy cavalry, the companion cavalry, elite horsemen who could strike at speed into gaps in enemy lines. Infantry pinned the enemy. Cavalry delivered the killing blow. In 338 BC at Chaeronea, Philip used this army to destroy Athens and Thebes in a single afternoon. His 18-year-old son Alexander commanded the left cavalry wing. Facing him, the sacred band of Thebes. 300 elite soldiers who had never been broken in battle. Alexander broke them. Every single one died where they stood. Then in 336 BC, at his own daughter's wedding, Philip was assassinated by a bodyguard. Alexander was 20 years old. The throne was his. The moment Philip died, everything moved at once. Rivals inside Macedonia positioned themselves. Alexander eliminated them before they could organize. Greek city-states smelled weakness in a young new king. Thessaly rebelled. Illyrian tribes mobilized on the northern border. Thebes declared independence. Alexander's response, speed. He marched south faster than anyone calculated was possible. He was outside Thebes before the city had finished organizing its resistance. He gave them one chance to stand down. They refused. Thebes was destroyed. Its population enslaved. The city erased from the map. Every other Greek state received the message instantly. Athens submitted. Every other city fell in line. 2 years after taking the throne, Greece pacified, borders secured, Alexander turned east. Spring, 334 BC. Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with 40,000 soldiers. He crossed in full armor and threw a spear into the Asian soil as he landed, claiming the continent by right of conquest. His army was a precision instrument. 9,000 Macedonian infantry with 18-foot pikes, marching 16 ranks deep, virtually unstoppable from the front. 3,000 elite hypaspists protecting the flanks. Greek allied infantry and mercenaries behind them. Agrian javelin throwers screening the advance. And the decisive arm, 1,800 companion cavalry, trained to charge at full speed in a tight wedge formation, hitting the weakest point of an enemy line with maximum concentrated force. Alexander led them personally into every single major battle. The Persian satraps, provincial governors, chose to face him at the Granicus River. A Greek general in their service named Memnon of Rhodes advised them against it. Burn crops, deny supplies, starve the Macedonians out. Don't fight them directly. The satraps refused his advice. They lined 10,000 cavalry on the far bank and waited. Alexander's officers urged caution at the Granicus. Wait for dawn. Cross in darkness. Fight on better terms. Alexander ignored them. He drove the companion cavalry straight into the river under a storm of arrows and javelins. On the opposite bank, Persian cavalry waited in formation. The collision was immediate. Horses slipping in the water, men fighting at arm's length. A Persian noble split Alexander's helmet with a sword stroke. The blade stopped just short of his skull. The general Clitus cut the attacker's arm off before he could strike again. Behind the cavalry, the Macedonian phalanx crossed and formed up. Persian horsemen facing 18-foot pikes with nowhere to go broke and fled. The Greek mercenaries in reserve were surrounded and destroyed. First battle. First victory. Asia Minor was open. Alexander moved south along the coast, seizing Persian naval ports. City after city fell or surrendered. Then in 333 BC, Darius III, king of kings, ruler of the Persian Empire, took the field himself. He moved his massive army behind Alexander, cutting off the retreat route at a coastal plain near Issus. 6 miles wide, mountains on one side, sea on the other. He thought he had trapped Alexander. The narrow ground made his numerical advantage worthless. Alexander struck hard on the right, punching through the Persian left wing. In the center, the phalanx ground forward against elite Greek mercenaries fighting for Persian gold. A gap opened. Alexander turned the companion cavalry into it, driving toward Darius himself. The Persian king watched the cavalry cutting through his own army directly at him. He turned and fled east, abandoned his chariot, abandoned his army, abandoned his mother, his wife, and his 3 children on the battlefield. Alexander captured the Persian royal family and placed them under his personal protection. He would not harm them. Issus was finished. The Persian field army had ceased to exist. Alexander turned south to eliminate Persian naval power completely. Most Phoenician cities surrendered immediately. Then came Tyre, an island fortress half a mile from shore, walls rising 150 feet from the waterline, its own powerful fleet, and the confidence of a city that had never fallen. Alexander built a causeway into the sea. Half a mile of stone and timber, constructed under constant naval attack and artillery fire from the walls. Fire ships were launched against the construction. Took 7 months. When the walls were finally breached, the city paid. 8,000 dead. 30,000 enslaved. Tyre ceased to exist as an independent power. Egypt surrendered without a battle. The Persian governor handed over the entire province and its treasury at the border. The Egyptian priesthood crowned Alexander pharaoh. He founded Alexandria at the Nile Delta, a city that would become the intellectual capital of the ancient world for 300 years. Then he turned back east. Darius had rebuilt. 331 BC. Gaugamela, open plain near modern Mosul, deliberately chosen by Darius to give his massive army room to operate. Scythe chariots, war elephants, a force vastly outnumbering Alexander's 47,000 men. The night before, his senior general Parmenion suggested a night attack, use darkness to neutralize Persian numbers. Alexander refused. He would not steal a victory in the dark. He slept soundly. His officers could not sleep at all. At dawn, Alexander studied the Persian line stretching beyond visual range in both directions. He began marching his right flank sideways, slowly pulling the Persian cavalry with him, stretching their line, creating tension. When the gap opened in the Persian center, he turned the companion cavalry and pointed them straight through it, directly at Darius. For the second time, the Persian king fled the battlefield. The army that still outnumbered Alexander's force 3-1 collapsed in minutes. By nightfall, the Persian Empire, 200 years old, the largest political entity the ancient world had ever seen, was finished as a military power. Alexander rode into Persepolis, took the treasury, burned the palace of Xerxes, the king who had burned Athens 150 years before. He didn't stop. He pursued Darius east into modern Iran. But Darius never made it to another battle. His own general Bessus seized him, stabbed him, and left him dying by a road as Alexander's cavalry closed in. Alexander found him still alive, sat with him, gave him water. When Darius died, Alexander covered him with his own cloak and sent the body back for a royal funeral. Then he hunted Bessus for 2 years through the mountains of modern Afghanistan and Central Asia, the hardest fighting of the entire campaign. Alexander adapted, broke his army into smaller, fast-moving columns, built fortified cities across the region to hold the ground, dozens of them, most named Alexandria. But cracks were forming inside his own command. He had adopted Persian court customs, robes, formal rituals, expectations of prostration. His Macedonian generals, who had followed him for a decade, were openly hostile. One night at a banquet, his general Clitus, the man who had saved his life at the Granicus, mocked him publicly. Drunk, angry, unfiltered, reminded him that Macedonian soldiers had built everything he claimed as his own. Alexander grabbed a spear from a guard, threw it across the room. Clitus died on the spot. Alexander locked himself away for 3 days, refused food, refused contact, wept without stopping. He had killed the man who saved his life. He knew no justification was possible. He came out on the 4th day and kept moving. 326 BC, Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush and entered India, a world completely unknown to Greeks. At the Hydaspes River in modern Pakistan, King Porus waited with 200 war elephants. Horses refused to charge elephants. The smell, the size, the noise caused panic. A direct cavalry charge was impossible. Alexander spent days making feints at the river crossing, marching troops to the bank at night and withdrawing, until Porus stopped reacting. Then, on a stormy night, he crossed 17 miles upstream. The battle was the hardest of his career. He used archers and javelin throwers to wound the elephants from a distance, drove his cavalry around the flanks, and systematically encircled sections of the Parava line. The elephants, maddened by wounds, began trampling their own infantry. Porus was captured, still upright, still on his elephant, still commanding. Alexander asked how he wished to be treated. Porus said, "As a king treats a king." Alexander gave him his kingdom back. Then he asked his army to keep going east. More rivers, more kingdoms, more of India. His army refused. 8 years of marching, 12,000 miles from home. They were done. Alexander argued, pleaded, raged. His officers held their position in respectful silence. For the first time in his life, he gave the order to turn back. The return march through the Gadrosian desert killed thousands. No water for days. Soldiers who had survived a decade of war died walking. Alexander walked rather than ride. Refused water when his men had none. He returned to Babylon. 32 years old. Arrow through the lung. Fractured skull. Broken bones. Permanent limp. Still planning the next campaign. In June 323 BC, a fever hit after a long banquet. It did not break. 10 days. His soldiers, hearing he was dying, demanded to see him. He ordered the doors opened. For hours they filed past his bed. He could not speak, could not move, but as each man passed, he found them with his eyes. His generals asked who would inherit the empire. He said one word, the strongest. On June 11th, 323 BC, Alexander was dead, 32 years old. His generals immediately went to war with each other. Within 40 years, the empire was gone. But the world he reshaped never went back. Greek language, Greek thought, Greek culture from Egypt to India. The foundation that Rome would inherit, that the Renaissance would rediscover, that still echoes today. 13 years, 0 defeats,